My name is Sharon, and from the outside, my life looks perfect. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside Chicago, a place where manicured lawns stretch endlessly, children ride their bikes down tree-lined streets, and everyone knows each other by first name. My husband Walter and I bought this house 5 years ago, right after we got married. It's spacious with 4 bedrooms, an open-concept kitchen, and a backyard big enough for our kids to play in. We have 2 beautiful children, Emma, who's 7, and Liam, who turned 4 last spring. On paper, it's everything I ever wanted. But here's the thing about perfection. It can feel so heavy when you're the one carrying it. I met Walter during my final year at Northwestern. He was steady, dependable, and kind, the kind of man who always remembered your coffee order and sent thoughtful texts just to check in. After things fell apart with Vince, Walter felt like a safe harbor. He didn't sweep me off my feet the way Vince had, but he promised stability. And back then, that promise was exactly what I thought I needed. Walter works as a financial analyst now, long hours spent crunching numbers in downtown skyscrapers. Me? I'm a part-time graphic designer, though most days it feels like my real job is being a mom. Between school drop-offs, soccer practices, and grocery runs, there's barely any time left for myself. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is finally quiet, I sit on the couch with a glass of wine and scroll through old photos on my phone. That's how it started tonight, the nostalgia creeping up on me like an unwelcome guest. Earlier this evening, while cleaning out the attic, I stumbled across a dusty shoebox tucked away behind stacks of photo albums. Inside were letters from Vince. Letters I hadn't read in over a decade. Each envelope smelled faintly of cedar wood, the same scent that used to cling to his leather jacket. As I traced my fingers over his messy handwriting, memories flooded. Back, road trips with the windows down, dancing barefoot in his tiny apartment, arguments that burned hot and fast like summer storms. Vince made me feel alive in ways no one else ever has. But he also broke my heart more times than I care to admit. Sitting cross-legged on the attic floor, I unfolded one of the letters. His words hit me like a punch to the chest. "You deserve someone who can keep up with your fire," he'd written once. At the time, I thought he meant himself. Now, looking back, maybe he was right about something else entirely. By the time I came downstairs, Walter still wasn't home. He'd texted earlier to say he'd be working late again. Lately, he's been pulling extra hours at the office, or so he says. I poured myself another glass of wine and sank into the armchair in the living room. The house felt eerily silent without him. And then, before I could stop myself, I whispered the truth aloud. Just once, barely audible. I miss how Vince made me feel. What I didn't realize, what I couldn't have known in that moment, was that Walter wasn't at the office. He was standing just outside the front door, keys in hand, frozen mid-step. That whisper would change everything. It's strange how something so small, a single sentence, barely louder than a breath, can unravel an entire life. I didn't even mean to say it out loud. It wasn't supposed to be real. It was just a thought, a fleeting ache that slipped past my lips before I could catch it. But once those words were out there, they couldn't be taken back. When I heard the front door creak open moments later, I assumed Walter had finally come home from work. I didn't turn around right away. I was too busy trying to shake off the unease settling in my chest. By the time I did look up, he was already standing in the doorway of the living room, his face unreadable. For a second, we just stared at each other, the silence between us thick and suffocating. "Sharon," he said eventually, his voice low and clipped. "What did you just say?" My heart sank. Oh God, he heard me. I didn't. I stammered, scrambling for some kind of explanation, but nothing coherent came out. How do you explain something like that? How do you tell your husband the man you've built a life with, that you miss the way someone else used to make you feel. Walter didn't wait for me to find the words. He turned on his heel and disappeared into the hallway. At first, I thought he was heading to our bedroom, maybe to cool off or process what he'd overheard. But when I followed him, I found him, grabbing his suitcase from the closet and throwing clothes into it haphazardly. "What are you doing?" I asked, panic rising in my throat. "I need space," he muttered, not looking at me. "I can't stay here tonight." "Wait, Walter. Please." I reached for his arm, but he pulled away. His expression was cold, distant, the kind of look I'd never seen directed at me before. "You don't understand. It's not what you think." But he wasn't listening. He zipped up the suitcase, grabbed his car keys from the counter, and walked out without another word. The sound of the front door slamming shut echoed through the house, leaving behind a void that felt impossible to fill. For a long time after he left, I stood there frozen, clutching the edge of the kitchen counter, like it might keep me grounded. My mind raced with questions. Where was he going? Would he come back tomorrow? Did he hate me now? But beneath all the uncertainty, there was something sharper, more painful: shame. I hated myself for letting those words slip out. Hated that. I'd been careless enough to let Walter overhear them. And yet, deep down, I couldn't deny the truth. Part of me did miss Vince, not as a person, necessarily, but as a memory, a feeling, a reminder of who I used to be before life became so predictable. The kids were asleep upstairs, oblivious to the chaos unfolding below. I crept into Emma's room and watched her for a moment, her tiny body curled under the covers, her stuffed bunny clutched tightly against her chest. She looked so peaceful, so innocent. Seeing her like that made me want to cry. What kind of mother was I if I couldn't even hold my own marriage together? Eventually, I forced myself to move. I called Walter's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I sent text after text, begging him to talk to me, to come home. No response. Finally, exhausted and defeated, I collapsed onto the couch and stared blankly at the TV, though I wasn't really seeing anything. Somewhere in the middle of the night, sleep claimed me, but it brought no relief. Instead, I dreamed of Vince, his crooked smile, his reckless laugh, the way he used to hold me like I was the only thing keeping him tethered to the earth. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight streaming through the windows, I felt even worse than I had the night before. Because now, reality was setting in. Walter was gone. And whether I liked it or not, I'd have to face the consequences of my actions. As I brewed a cup of coffee and stared out the kitchen window, I noticed something odd. Walter's car was still parked in the driveway. If he hadn't driven away, where had he gone? And why hadn't he taken his phone? A chill ran down my spine. Something about this whole situation didn't add up. Maybe Walter wasn't as calm and collected as he seemed last night. Maybe there was more to his decision to leave than met the eye. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the only one hiding secrets. The days that followed felt like living in a fog. Walter didn't come home. He didn't answer my calls or respond to any of my texts. I tried reaching out to his office, pretending it was an urgent family matter, but his assistant said he hadn't been in all week. That's when the panic really set in. At first, I convinced myself he was staying with a friend or at a hotel nearby, cooling off and giving himself time to think. But as the hours turned into days, the uncertainty started eating away at me. Was he okay? Had something happened to him? Or worse, had he decided to leave for good? The kids noticed his absence almost immediately. "Where's Daddy?" Emma asked one morning over breakfast, her big brown eyes wide with confusion. "He's working late," I lied, forcing a smile I didn't feel. "You know how busy he gets sometimes. But why doesn't he call us? she pressed, and I had no answer for that. Instead, I changed the subject, asking about her spelling test and whether she'd practiced her piano lesson. Distraction became my new survival tactic. By the third day, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers. I started going through Walter's things, hoping to find some clue about where he might be. His wallet was missing, along with a few changes of clothes, which suggested he'd planned this departure ahead of time. But what stopped me cold was the credit card statement I found tucked inside his desk drawer. It wasn't unusual for Walter to use his work credit card for travel expenses, but these charges were different. There were receipts for a luxury hotel downtown, meals at expensive restaurants, and even a rental car. None of it made sense. Why would Walter splurge on a fancy hotel room if he was just trying to clear his head? And why hadn't he mentioned anything to me before leaving? Then there was the phone log. Scrolling through his recent calls, I spotted a number I didn't recognize, a local area code, but not one I associated with any of our friends or family. My stomach churned as I stared at the screen. Who was he talking to? I debated calling the number myself, but fear held me back. What if it belonged to someone I didn't want to know? Someone who could explain Walter's sudden disappearance better than I ever could? Instead, I called Claire, my closest friend since college. She'd always been the person I turned to when life got messy, and right now it was messier than ever. "Sharon," she said gently after I poured out everything. The whisper, Walter walking out, the strange charges on his credit card. "Have you considered the possibility that maybe Walter's hiding something too?" "What do you mean?" I asked, though deep down I already knew. "I mean, people don't just walk out without warning unless they're dealing with their own issues. Maybe he's been unhappy for a while and didn't know how to tell you. Or maybe..." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Maybe he's seeing someone else." The thought hit me like a punch to the gut. Walter cheating? It seemed impossible. He was the most dependable, loyal person I knew. But then again, I never imagined he'd leave me either. That night, unable to sleep, I sat alone in the dark scrolling through old photos on my phone. Pictures of Walter and me smiling together at birthday parties, vacations, holidays. We looked so happy, so in love. Was it all a lie? Or had we simply drifted apart without realizing it? The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Not just at Walter, but at myself. How had I let things get this bad? How had I missed the signs that our marriage was crumbling beneath the surface? And yet, amidst the anger and guilt, another emotion began to creep in. Determination. If Walter wanted to play games, fine. I wouldn't sit around waiting for him to come back or explain himself. I'd figure out the truth on my own, no matter what it took. The next morning, I hired a private investigator. It felt extreme, almost melodramatic, but I told myself it was necessary. After all, I had 2 kids depending on me. They deserved answers, and so did I. As I dropped off the paperwork at the PI's office, I caught sight of myself in the reflection of the glass door. For the first time in days, I looked resolved. Whatever secrets Walter was keeping, I was going to uncover them. And once I did, I'd decide what to do next. Because one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let him destroy our family without a fight. It took exactly 2 days for the private investigator to deliver the bombshell I wasn't prepared for. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee and trying to distract myself by scrolling through design inspiration boards on my laptop, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from the PI, an attachment with photos and a brief summary of his findings. My hands trembled as I opened it, bracing myself for whatever ugly truth lay ahead. The first photo made my stomach drop. It showed Walter walking into a sleek downtown hotel, suitcase in hand. Another captured him sitting at an upscale restaurant across from someone. A woman. She had long dark hair, sharp features, and an air of confidence that radiated even through the grainy image. They were laughing together, their body language relaxed and intimate. But it was the final photo that hit hardest, a close-up of the woman's face. Her name was printed beneath it, Rachel Monroe. According to the PI, she worked at Walter's firm. Not just any colleague, though. She was one of the senior partners. My breath hitched. All this time I'd assumed Walter was simply unhappy or overwhelmed by our marriage. I never imagined he might have been involved with someone else. For hours, I stared at the photos, replaying every interaction Walter and I had shared over the past few months. Had he been distant because of work stress, or because he was secretly planning a life with Rachel? Was his sudden departure really about my whispered confession, or had it been inevitable all along? The betrayal stung worse than anything Vince had ever done. At least with Vince, the pain had been raw and immediate. With Walter, it felt insidious, like discovering poison in something you thought was safe. Later that evening, while the kids were playing in the backyard, my phone buzzed. Again. This time it wasn't the PI, it was a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Sharon? The voice on the other end was hesitant but familiar. Too familiar. Vince? My heart skipped a beat. How did you get this number? I ran into Walter, he said bluntly, skipping pleasantries altogether. He mentioned he left home, said something about overhearing you talking about me. My grip tightened on the phone. What are you talking about? Where did you see him? At a bar near Millennium Park, Vince replied. A couple nights ago. He looked wrecked, honestly. Drunk, too. Kept saying stuff about how you never loved him, how you were still hung up on me. The words hit like a slap. That's ridiculous, I snapped. You don't know anything about my marriage. Maybe not, Vince admitted. But I do know what it looks like when someone's drowning in regret. And Walter? He seemed like a guy who'd already given up. His tone softened, and for a moment, I could almost hear the old Vince, the one who used to sit beside me on rainy afternoons, listening to records and talking about everything and nothing. I'm not calling to stir things up, he continued. I just thought you should know. Whatever's going on between you two, it's bigger than a fight or a misunderstanding. You deserve answers, Sharon. Don't let him ghost you without giving you the truth. We ended the call shortly after, but Vince's words lingered in my mind. For years, I'd told myself I moved on from him, that Walter was the right choice. But now, faced with the wreckage of my marriage, I couldn't help but wonder if I'd chosen safety over passion, and whether that decision had doomed us both. The next morning, I decided to confront Walter directly, armed with the PI's report and the knowledge that he'd been spotted drinking alone. I drove to the hotel where he'd been staying. When I arrived, the lobby felt eerily quiet, the kind of luxury that screamed loneliness rather than comfort. Asked the front desk clerk for his room number, flashing my wedding ring and claiming an emergency. She hesitated but eventually gave in. As I rode the elevator up to the 10th floor, my pulse raced. What would I say to him? How would he react? When I knocked on the door, it took a minute before Walter opened it. His eyes widened in shock when he saw me standing there, clutching the folder of evidence. Sharon, he said, his voice hoarse. What are you doing here? I came for answers. I shot back, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Who is she, Walter? And don't lie to me, I already know. For a moment, he looked like a deer caught in headlights. Then, slowly, he sank onto the edge of the bed, running his hands through his disheveled hair. Her name's Rachel, he admitted finally. We've been seeing each other. For months. The confirmation hit harder than I expected. Why? I demanded, my voice cracking. Was it because of what I said that night? Because I missed how Vince made me feel? No, Walter snapped, looking up at me sharply. This isn't about Vince, Sharon. It's about us. About how empty things have felt for years. I tried to fix it. I really did. But you were always so focused on keeping everything perfect, so scared of rocking the boat, that you never stopped to ask if I was happy. His words cut deeper than any accusation could, because somewhere inside, I knew they were true. And Rachel? I pressed, my voice trembling. Did she make you happy? She made me feel alive, he confessed quietly. Like I mattered again. But it doesn't change the fact that I failed you, that I failed us. We sat there in silence for a long time, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on us. Part of me wanted to scream, to lash out at him for betraying me. But another part, the part that had once loved him deeply, felt only sadness. Because no matter whose fault it was, one thing was clear. Our marriage was over, and maybe, just maybe, it had been for longer than either of us cared to admit. The drive home from the hotel felt like an eternity. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white, as if holding on could keep me from falling apart completely. Walter's confession replayed in my mind over and over again. His admission of betrayal, his talk of emptiness, his assertion that I'd been too afraid to face the cracks in our marriage. Each word stung worse than the last, not because it was unexpected, but because there was truth in it. When I pulled into the driveway, I sat in the car for a long time, staring at the house that had once symbolized everything I wanted. A family, stability, love, and now felt more like a tombstone marking the end of something broken. Finally, I forced myself to get out and go inside. The kids were upstairs watching cartoons, blissfully unaware of the storm raging in their mother's heart for their sake. I plastered on a smile and called them down for dinner, pretending everything was normal, even though my insides felt hollow. That night, after the kids were asleep, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened the folder containing the PI's report. I flipped through the photos again. Walter with Rachel, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. The receipts for lavish meals and luxury accommodations funded by the life we'd built together. Every detail burned into my brain, fueling a fire I hadn't felt in years, a mix of anger, hurt, and determination. But alongside the anger was clarity. For so long, I'd blamed myself for the unraveling of our marriage, convinced that my lingering feelings for Vince, or my inability to fully let go of the past, had driven Walter away. Now, seeing the evidence of his betrayal laid bare before me, I realized something important. This wasn't just my failure. It was ours. And while I couldn't change what had happened, I could decide how to move forward. I spent hours drafting emails, gathering documents, and making calls. By morning, I had a plan. The next day, I met with a lawyer recommended by Claire. His office smelled faintly of leather and old books, a stark contrast to the chaos swirling inside me. As I explained my situation, the adultery, the abandonment, the financial discrepancies, he nodded thoughtfully, jotting notes onto a legal pad. "You're entitled to full custody," he said confidently, "especially given the circumstances. We'll also pursue spousal support and division of assets. He won't walk away unscathed." Hearing those words gave me a strange sense of power. For years, I'd defined myself through my roles as a wife and mother, subconsciously believing that my worth depended on keeping everyone else happy. But now, sitting across from a man who promised to fight for me, I began to see myself differently. Over the following weeks, the battle lines were drawn. Walter moved out of the hotel and into an apartment closer to Rachel's place, though neither of them reached out to me directly. Instead, communication came solely through lawyers, each side trading accusations and demands like weapons in a war neither of us truly wanted to win. Meanwhile, I threw myself into preparing for the future. I updated my portfolio, took on freelance projects to boost my income, and started looking at new schools for Emma and Liam. At night, when the kids were asleep, I allowed myself moments of grief, but only briefly. Crying wouldn't fix anything. Action would. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table reviewing custody agreements, my phone buzzed. It was another text from Vince. "Hey," it read simply. "Just checking in. How are you holding up?" For a moment, I considered ignoring it. After all, reaching out to Vince felt dangerously close to leaning on the past instead of building toward the future. But then I remembered something Walter had said during our confrontation. "You never stopped to ask if I was happy." Maybe it was time I asked someone else that question, including myself. We met for coffee at a quiet cafe downtown. Vince looked older than I remembered. His hair slightly grayer, his features sharper. But his smile was the same. Warm, familiar, tinged with mischief. "You look good," he said softly, stirring sugar into his latte. "So do you," I replied, though the compliment felt inadequate. We talked for hours, catching up on the years we'd missed. He told me about his career as a photographer, traveling the world and capturing stories through his lens. I shared snippets of my life post-Vince, the highs, the lows, the regrets. At one point, he leaned forward, his expression serious. "Do you think we ruined each other?" he asked suddenly. "What do you mean?" "I mean, do you ever wonder if we loved each other too hard, too recklessly? If maybe we set some kind of standard neither of us could live up to afterward?" His words struck a nerve. For years, I'd romanticized my relationship with Vince, painting it as this whirlwind romance full of passion and intensity. But sitting here now, talking to him as an adult instead of the reckless 20-something I used to be, I saw things differently. Our love hadn't been perfect. It had been messy, chaotic, often painful. And yet, it had shaped me in ways I couldn't deny. "No," I said finally. "I don't think we ruined each other. I think we taught each other how to feel deeply. What we did with those lessons afterward, well, that's on us." He smiled, nodding slowly. "Fair enough." By the time we parted ways, I felt lighter somehow, as if shedding pieces of the guilt and longing I'd carried for so long. Vince wasn't the answer to my problems, and I knew that. But reconnecting with him reminded me of something crucial. I still had the capacity to love, to feel, to start over. And starting over was exactly what I intended to do, because no matter how much Walter had hurt me, no matter how many mistakes I'd made along the way, one thing was certain. I deserved better. Better than regret. Better than betrayal. Better than settling for anything less than happiness. This time, I vowed, I wouldn't let fear hold me back. It's been 6 months since Walter walked out of our lives. 6 months since I sat in that cafe with Vince, sipping coffee and rediscovering parts of myself I thought were lost forever. 6 months of navigating the chaos of single motherhood, legal battles, and late-night moments of doubt. And yet, here I am, still standing, still breathing, still moving forward. The divorce was finalized last week. It wasn't pretty. There were arguments over assets, tense negotiations about custody schedules, and more tears than I care to admit. But in the end, I got what mattered most: full custody of Emma and Liam, a fair settlement to ensure their future and closure. Walter didn't fight me as hard as I expected him to. Maybe he realized, deep down, that he'd already lost us long before he left. Rachel stayed by his side throughout it all, her polished exterior masking whatever turmoil might have been brewing beneath. Occasionally, I'd see them together at drop-offs or school events, Walter looking tired, Rachel holding his arm possessively. I felt nothing but pity for both of them. They could keep their shiny new life. I had something far more valuable: peace. Life now looks different, quieter in some ways, but fuller in others. I sold the big house. It was too much space, too many memories, and bought a cozy townhome closer to the city. The kids adjusted quickly, thrilled by the idea of living somewhere with a park nearby and neighbors who waved hello every morning. For the first time in years, we've started eating dinner together without distractions, talking about our days instead of rushing through meals like strangers sharing a table. Work has been another bright spot. After years of freelancing part-time, I decided to take the plunge and open my own design studio. It's small for now, just me and one assistant, but it's mine. Every logo, brochure, and branding project feels like a step toward reclaiming not only my career, but also my identity. And then there's Ethan. We met at an art gallery opening where my studio was showcasing its first major client project. He's a local painter whose work hung alongside mine, a striking collection of abstract landscapes that seemed to pulse with emotion. There was something magnetic about him, an energy that drew people in without demanding attention. When he introduced himself during the reception, his handshake was firm, his smile genuine. "I love your designs," he said, gesturing to the posters lining the walls. "They're bold but approachable, like they're inviting you to explore." "Thank you," I replied, surprised by how genuinely pleased I felt. "I think your paintings are doing the same thing, just in a completely different way." Our conversation flowed effortlessly after that, weaving between art, music, travel, and everything in between. By the time the night ended, we exchanged numbers, not because either of us expected anything, but because it felt natural. Over the following weeks, we kept in touch. Coffee dates turned into dinners, which eventually led to weekend trips to farmers markets and lazy afternoons spent wandering museums. Ethan isn't Vince. He doesn't ignite the same fiery passion I once knew, but he brings something else: calmness, understanding, partnership. With him, I don't feel the need to prove myself or chase perfection. Instead, I feel seen, appreciated, for exactly who I am. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Ethan asked me a question I hadn't expected. "Do you ever miss it?" he said softly. "The intensity? The drama?" I thought about it for a moment, letting the orange hues of the sky wash over me. "No," I answered honestly. "Not anymore. I used to think love had to be this whirlwind, this constant push and pull. But now I realize it can be simpler than that. It can be two people choosing each other day after day, even when the fireworks fade." He smiled, reaching for my hand. "That sounds nice." "It is," I said, squeezing his fingers gently. "Really nice." Later that night, after Ethan left, I tucked Emma and Liam into bed and kissed their foreheads goodnight. As I turned off the hallway light and headed to my room, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. My hair was pulled back messily, my face free of makeup, my pajamas wrinkled from a long day. And yet, for the first time in years, I liked what I saw. I wasn't perfect. I never would be. But I was enough. Enough for my kids, enough for Ethan, enough for myself. For so long, I'd defined my happiness through the lens of others. Vince's passion, Walter's stability, society's expectations of what a perfect wife and mother should look like. But now, standing alone in the quiet of my bedroom, I understood something profound. True happiness comes from within. From learning to forgive yourself, to embrace imperfection, to trust that life will carry you through even its darkest storms. As I crawled into bed and closed my eyes, I whispered a silent thank you to the universe, to fate, to whoever might be listening, because despite everything, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the uncertainty, I'd found my way back to myself. And that, more than anything, felt like victory.